Hello, welcome to Chapter 4, Veterinary Ethics and Legal Issues. Today we will define branches of ethics, talk about a Veterinary Practice Act, define criminal and civil law, go over informed consent forms, explain ways to prevent malpractice and negligence, and finally list the most common complaints in veterinary medicine. Social ethics are accepted by society at large and are separated into laws like those against murder, rape, and stealing, along with ordinances such as those that regulate pets on leashes. Personal ethics are an individual's definition of what is right or wrong, like religious beliefs or relationship values. Professional ethics are developed by workers in a particular discipline, developing rules, codes, and conduct for the profession to follow. The purpose of a professional code of ethics is to help members of a profession achieve high levels of behavior through moral consciousness, decision-making, and practice. The AVMA Principles of Veterinary Medical Ethics is a document on ethical issues in veterinary practice, focusing more on the relationships one has with colleagues than on the broader range of moral and ethical issues relating to animals. The NAVTA Code of Ethics for veterinary technicians is a combination of professional ethics that focus both on practicing medicine and protecting the profession as a whole. The VHMA holds a strong code of ethics for the profession, practice, and patient. Descriptive ethics relates to what members of the profession think is right and wrong and does not involve making value judgments about what is moral or immoral in a professional's behavior. Official veterinary ethics involve the creation of the official ethical standards adopted by organizations of professionals and imposed on their members. Administrative veterinary ethics involves actions by administrative government bodies that regulate veterinary practice and activities in which veterinarians engage. Normative ethics refer to the search for correct principles of good and bad, right and wrong, and justice or injustice. The difference between ethics and law is enforcement. The government enforces laws, whereas the professional associations enforce ethics. The Veterinary Practice Act of each state defines the requirements necessary to practice veterinary medicine within that state. AVMA has created a Model Practice Act that most states use while developing their state veterinary practice acts. Laws and regulations vary among the states. Therefore, each practice should be familiar with its own state's Veterinary Practice Act. Practice acts are regulated and enforced by the State Veterinary Medical Board. This board is responsible for licensing and testing of veterinarians and technicians and the evaluation of complaints presented by the public. With adequate evidence of wrongdoing, boards can revoke any veterinary license. Law is divided into two categories: civil and criminal. Criminal law prosecutes crimes committed against the public as a whole, like an animal abuse case. A misdemeanor charge is less serious than a felony and generally results in less jail time. Civil law relates to the duties between people and the government, like a contract dispute between a veterinarian and an employee. Tort law permits people to sue for relief of an injury that has occurred and can be determined to be intentional or unintentional. Examples of intentional torts include fraud, and an example of an unintentional tort claim would be the failure to practice the standard of care. Contract law was developed to ensure that promises made by people would be fulfilled, and if not, then they would be brought to court. Negligence is defined as either performing an act that a person would not have done under similar circumstances, or failing to perform an act that a person would have done. For instance, a veterinary technician who fails to complete treatments on the weekend can be held liable for negligence. Malpractice can refer to any unprofessional, illegal, or immoral conduct that results in the injury of a patient. Most client-patient relationships are established when the patient was presented to the practice by the owner. Breach of duty is the failure of the veterinarian or technician to act in accordance with the standard of care. The standard of care can be defined as the duty to exercise the care and diligence that is ordinarily exercised by a reasonably competent veterinarian under normal circumstances. In most states, standard of care will be held to the specialist level, meaning that veterinarians should refer or recommend referral to a specialty center when a case is complex and requires the intervention of a specialist. Veterinarians may be held liable if they don't make the recommendation or do not document it in the medical record. If the client declines the referral, then declined treatment should be documented clearly. Proximate cause is the connection between the negligent act of the veterinarian and the technician, and the harm to the patient caused by the act. Lastly, damages or harm incurred by the patient as a result of the negligent act must be displayed. Listed here are common examples of malpractice. Clients must be informed when making decisions, and proof of informed consent must be included in the record. If it is not on the record, it did not happen, is a common statement in the court of law, so everything needs to be documented. Informed consent is when a veterinary practice has given information to a client regarding a proposed treatment, then allows the client to make an informed decision regarding whether to proceed with the treatment. Consent must be given freely. Treatments and diagnoses must be given in understandable terms. Risks, benefits, and prognosis of procedures must be stated, as well as a prognosis if no treatment is elected, as well as an alternative treatments or procedures, along with their own risks, benefits, and costs. The client must be given the right to ask questions and have them answered. A signature at the bottom of a form does not necessarily mean consent was fully understood or given. Most people sign without knowing what they are signing for. Blank spaces should be placed next to statements of risks, benefits, and prognoses for both the client and the team member reviewing the consent form to sign. Law of unjust enrichment allows veterinary practices to treat an injured animal that is not accompanied by their owner. The clinic should first photograph the injuries, then provide supportive care only while trying to make contact with the owner. Record all attempts of contact in the medical record. Once the patient is stable, only supportive care should be rendered or life-saving techniques. Excuse me. Emergency care does not have to be provided if there is not a valid client-patient relationship. However, according to the AVMA Code of Ethics, veterinarians have an ethical responsibility to provide essential services for animals when necessary to save life or relieve suffering, subsequent to client agreement. Such emergency care should be limited to euthanasia to relieve suffering or to stabilize the patient for transport to another source of animal care. If there is already one established, then medical care has to be provided until one of these outcomes happens. The veterinary practice, not the pet owner, owns the medical record. The only time medical records should be released without consent is if the patient has a reportable disease that must be reported to state or USDA. Medical records are legal documents and should be easy to read, completed, and corrected only with a single line and initials accompanying the change. A complaint is a formal action noting dissatisfaction with the services of a licensed veterinarian or credentialed veterinary technician. The complaint is filed with the state veterinary board office, which sends a letter to the veterinarian and/or technician. Be sure that your address is always updated with the state board. An investigator is assigned to the case and reviews medical records and completes interviews. The complaint is reviewed by a committee and then is submitted to the board. The board takes ultimate action against the veterinarian or technician and can dismiss the case or settle the case without a hearing. In these cases, continuing education and fines may occur. If the complaint is found to be severe, the board requests a hearing. The result of a hearing may impose continuing education, fines, license suspension, or revocation. All hearing decisions can be appealed. Here is a list of the most common complaints and violations brought to state veterinary boards. And with that, this concludes the lecture for Chapter 4.